black custodian quietly mops the floors at an elite martial arts gym in Chicago. Suddenly, he catches the attention of an arrogant black belt instructor. The instructor decides to humiliate the janitor in front of the entire class, demanding he step onto the mat for a demonstration. As the instructor throws punch after punch, each one missing its target completely, the custodian moves like smoke, untouchable and eerily calm. What the instructor doesn't know is that he just challenged a 5-time world MMA champion who disappeared from the fighting world 25 years ago, carrying a secret so dark it forced him into hiding forever. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The sound of leather gloves hitting heavy bags echoed through Elite Combat Academy as the advanced class pushed through their final drills. It was 8:30 on a Thursday night in downtown Chicago, and most gyms would have been empty by now. But Marcus Iron Fist Sullivan never ended his sessions early. The 38-year-old black belt instructor thrived on pushing his students past their limits, and tonight was no different. "Come on, push harder! You think your opponent's going to give you a break?" Marcus barked at his 10 students, his voice cutting through the rhythmic thuds of training. His black belt hung perfectly around his waist, each stripe a testament to 15 years of dedicated training and an ego that had grown with every promotion. In the corner of the gym, Andre Williams methodically mopped the floors, his movements quiet and deliberate. At 45, the custodian had been working at Elite Combat Academy for exactly 4 weeks. He always arrived after hours when the students had left, but tonight the advanced class had run late. Andre kept his head down, focused on his work, hoping to remain invisible until the session ended. Marcus caught sight of Andre and felt that familiar surge of superiority that came whenever he saw someone he perceived as beneath him. The instructor had built his reputation not just on his fighting skills, but on his ability to command respect through intimidation. In his mind, everyone had their place in the world, and a janitor cleaning up after real fighters certainly knew his. "Hey, you there with the mop?" Marcus called out, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority mixed with condescension that he'd perfected over the years. Andre paused in his cleaning, but didn't look up immediately. He'd heard that tone before in other places, other jobs. 25 years of keeping his head down had taught him that silence was often the safest response. "Yeah, I'm talking to you," Marcus continued, stepping away from his students and walking toward Andre. "You've been working here for a month now. Ever seen a real sparring session up close?" The 10 students had stopped their training, now sensing something happening. Maya Chen, a 24-year-old psychology graduate student with a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, felt an uncomfortable knot forming in her stomach. She'd been training under Marcus for 2 years and had seen this behavior before, though never directed at an employee. Andre finally looked up, his dark eyes meeting Marcus's gaze for just a moment before looking away. "Just finishing up the floors, sir. Don't want to interrupt your class." Marcus smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed having power over others. "Interrupt? Nah, man. I'm thinking this could be educational. My students here work hard to learn proper technique, proper respect for the martial arts." He gestured broadly to his class. "Maybe you'd like to step on the mat, show them what someone looks like who's never trained a day in his life." Several students shifted uncomfortably. Maya exchanged a worried glance with her training partner, David Kim, a quiet accountant who'd been coming to the gym for 3 years. Neither of them spoke up, but both felt the wrongness of what was happening. Andre's grip tightened slightly on the mop handle, a movement so subtle that only someone with trained eyes would have noticed it. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm just here to do my job." "Come on," Marcus pressed, now circling Andre like a predator, sensing weakness. "Don't tell me you're scared. Just a friendly demonstration. Nothing serious." His voice carried to every corner of the gym, ensuring all his students could hear. "I bet you've never even thrown a proper punch right." What Marcus didn't know, what none of them could have guessed, was that Andre Williams had spent the last 25 years trying to forget who he used to be. 25 years since he'd walked away from everything that had once defined him. 25 years of carrying a secret so heavy that some nights he still woke up in a cold sweat hearing the sound of his best friend's last breath. Andre set down his mop and bucket, his movements deliberate and controlled. When he straightened up, something flickered in his eyes for just a moment, something that made Marcus take an involuntary half-step backward before his ego reasserted itself. "All right," Andre said quietly, his voice carrying an odd weight that seemed to change the atmosphere in the room. "But when we're done here, you're going to apologize to your students for turning their training into a circus." Marcus laughed loudly, but the sound came out slightly forced. "Apologize, brother. You're going to be the one apologizing to the floor when you meet it." What none of them realized was that they were about to witness something that would be talked about for years to come. Because Andre Ghost Williams wasn't just a custodian with a mop and bucket. He was a man who had once been called the most technically perfect fighter of his generation, a 5-time world champion who had walked away from glory at the height of his career. And tonight, for the first time in 25 years, he was about to remember exactly who he used to be. Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline as he watched Andre set down the cleaning supplies. This was exactly the kind of moment he lived for, the chance to demonstrate his superiority in front of his students while putting someone in their place. He'd done this dance dozens of times before with cocky beginners who thought they could challenge him, but never with a janitor. The novelty of it excited him. "Everyone gather around," Marcus announced, his voice carrying the theatrical flair he used when he wanted to make a point. "You're about to see a practical demonstration of why there's a hierarchy in the world of martial arts." His 10 students formed a reluctant semicircle around the mat. Some seemed eager for the spectacle, others visibly uncomfortable with what was unfolding. Maya Chen felt her stomach tighten as she watched Andre step onto the mat. There was something about the way he moved, fluid controlled like water flowing over stone, that didn't match Marcus's narrative about an untrained janitor. "Look, everyone," Marcus continued, gesturing dramatically toward Andre. "Here we have someone who spent his whole life on the outside looking in, cleaning up after real fighters watching from the sidelines." His voice carried that particular edge of cruelty that made Maya's skin crawl. Some people just aren't built for combat sports. They're built for, well, you know, support roles. Andre stood quietly in the center of the mat, his hands at his sides, breathing steady and controlled. But behind his calm exterior, old memories were stirring. Memories of crowds jeering of commentators who questioned whether a kid from the South Side had any business in elite fighting circles. Memories of proving them wrong over and over again until the noise stopped and respect took its place. "I don't want any trouble," Andre said calmly, his voice carrying an odd authority that made the room fall silent. "Just want to finish my work and get home to my family." Marcus laughed, but the sound came out harsh and forced. "Family, that's sweet. Tell you what, after I'm done schooling, maybe you can tell them all about how you learned some respect for real martial artists." Maya had heard enough. The 24-year-old had spent 2 years documenting workplace discrimination cases for her master's thesis in sports psychology, and what she was witnessing made her blood boil. She couldn't stand by and watch this anymore. "Sensei Marcus," she interrupted, her voice trembling slightly but determined. "With respect, this doesn't feel like teaching. This feels like bullying." The gym went dead silent. In 2 years of training at Elite Combat Academy, no student had ever challenged Marcus directly. The instructor's face flushed red, his jaw clenching as he turned his full attention to Maya. "Excuse me, Miss Chen." Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerously low register. "Did you just question my teaching methods?" Maya's heart pounded against her ribs, but she held her ground. "I'm saying that humiliating someone who's just trying to do his job isn't what martial arts is supposed to teach us about respect." Several students exchanged nervous glances. David Kim looked like he wanted to support Maya, but couldn't find his voice. 2 other students nodded almost imperceptibly, while the rest stared at the floor, afraid to get involved. Marcus felt his authority being challenged in front of his entire class, and it triggered something primal in him. His reputation was built on fear and intimidation, and he couldn't allow a student, especially a young woman, to undermine him publicly. "You know what, Maya," Marcus said, his voice carrying a threat that made everyone in the room tense up. "If you can't respect my methods, maybe this isn't the right gym for you. There are plenty of places more suited to people with your sensitivity." The words hung in the air like poison. Maya felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to back down. "My tuition is paid through the end of the year, and I believe everyone here deserves a learning environment based on mutual respect, not humiliation." That's when Andre did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a nervous or submissive smile, but the slow, calculated expression of someone who had just found a reason to stop hiding. For 25 years, Andre had carried the weight of guilt over the accident that ended his career, the death of his best friend and training partner Tony "Hammer" Rodriguez in a sparring session gone wrong. Tony had died because Andre lost control after enduring a barrage of racist taunts from the crowd that night. Since then, Andre had sworn never to fight again, never to let anger drive his actions. But watching this brave young woman stand up for principles of justice that he had abandoned decades ago, Andre Williams began to remember who he really was. "Marcus," Andre said, his voice cutting through the tension with quiet authority. "The young lady is right. This isn't about martial arts. This is about you trying to feel important by making others feel small." Marcus spun around, his face twisted with indignation. "How dare you lecture me about martial arts? You don't even know what a dojo is." Andre took a step forward, and something fundamental shifted in his posture. His shoulders straightened, his center of gravity lowered imperceptibly, and his feet positioned themselves in a stance that any experienced fighter would immediately recognize as perfect. The change was so subtle that most people in the room missed it, but Marcus felt it like a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. "Actually," Andre said, his voice calm as still water, "I know exactly what a dojo is, and I know that this place stopped being one the moment you decided to use it as a stage for your ego." Marcus felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. There was something about the way Andre occupied space now, the way he seemed to have grown larger without moving, that awakened every instinct for self-preservation Marcus had ever developed. But his wounded pride wouldn't let him back down, not in front of his students, not when his entire reputation was on the line. "Enough talk," Marcus growled, dropping into his favorite fighting stance. "Time for you to learn some respect the hard way." What Marcus couldn't see was that Andre had already identified every weakness in his technique, the high guard that left his ribs exposed, the weight distribution that telegraphed his movements, the emotional state that would make him predictable and sloppy. 25 years away from professional fighting hadn't erased decades of refined tactical analysis. If anything, the years of enforced stillness had sharpened Andre's ability to read opponents like open books. Maya watched the scene unfold with growing fascination and dread. Something about the way Andre breathed, the way his muscles seemed to coil without visible tension, reminded her of the nature documentaries she'd studied for her research on predator behavior. The absolute calm that preceded explosive action. Andre closed his eyes, briefly allowing muscle memory to surface after years of suppression. When he opened them again, Marcus was looking directly into the eyes of a man who had once been called the most dangerous fighter on the planet. "Last chance," Andre offered quietly. "Apologize to Maya. Apologize to your students. Turn this back into a place of learning instead of a place of fear." Marcus laughed, but this time the sound was purely nervous. "You're going to be begging for mercy when you're flat on your back." What Marcus didn't realize was that Andre had just made a decision that would change both their lives forever. For the first time in 25 years, the ghost was about to remind the world why legends never truly die. They just wait for the right moment to return. The tension in the room had reached a breaking point. Marcus stood in his fighting stance, fists raised, while Andre remained motionless in the center of the mat. But it was Maya who commanded everyone's attention now. Her small frame seemed to radiate a courage that made even the largest students in the room feel small by comparison. "You know what, Marcus?" Maya said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I've been documenting behavior patterns in competitive sports environments for my thesis. What you're doing right now, it's textbook abuse of power disguised as instruction." David Kim felt his chest tighten as he watched his training partner put her entire academic future on the line. He'd seen other students get blacklisted from gyms for far less than what Maya was doing right now. But he also knew she was right, and his silence felt like complicity. Marcus felt his face burning with embarrassment and rage. In all his years of teaching, no student had ever dissected his behavior with such clinical precision. The fact that it was coming from someone half his size, someone he'd always viewed as just another monthly tuition payment, made it even worse. "You think you understand what's happening here?" Marcus snarled, taking a threatening step toward Maya. You think your little college psychology class taught you how the real world works. Andre watched Marcus move toward Maya and felt something shift deep in his chest. It was the same protective instinct that had driven him to fight professionally in the first place, not for glory or money, but to prove that people like him could stand up to bullies and win. For 25 years, he'd suppressed that instinct, buried it under layers of guilt and regret. But seeing this young woman risk everything to defend a principle awakened something in him that had been dormant for too long. "That's enough," Andre said, his voice cutting through the confrontation like a blade. Marcus spun back toward Andre, his anger now having two targets. "You stay out of this. This is between me and her." "No," Andre replied, moving smoothly between Marcus and Maya. "This is between you and everyone you've ever made feel smaller so you could feel bigger. And that stops right now." The students formed a tighter circle around the mat, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Jennifer Walsh, a nurse who'd been training for 6 months, pulled out her phone and started recording. She'd seen enough workplace harassment in hospitals to recognize the importance of documenting what was happening. Marcus felt cornered, his authority challenged from multiple directions. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to reassert control, to remind everyone in the room who was in charge. He reached out and shoved Andre hard in the chest, putting his full body weight behind it. Andre absorbed the push without moving a single inch. His feet remained planted like tree roots, and Marcus felt as if he'd tried to move a concrete wall. The instructor stumbled backward, his confidence faltering for the first time that evening. "Interesting," Andre said quietly, more to himself than to Marcus. "It's been a long time since someone tried to provoke me like that." There was something in Andre's tone that changed the entire atmosphere of the room. It wasn't anger or threat. It was the frightening calm of someone who had walked through much darker valleys and emerged transformed on the other side. Maya stood behind Andre, her heart racing as she realized she was no longer facing this alone. There was something about the way Andre carried himself now that reminded her of the documentaries she'd watched about elite athletes. The economy of movement, the controlled breathing, the presence that radiated quiet confidence. "You want to know the difference between real strength and what you've been showing these students?" Andre asked, his voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the room lean forward to listen. Marcus tried to maintain his aggressive posture, but something fundamental had shifted. The dynamic in the room had completely changed, and he could feel his control slipping away with each passing second. "The difference," Andre continued, "is that real strength protects people. It doesn't prey on them. Real strength builds others up instead of tearing them down. And real strength knows when to walk away from a fight that doesn't need to happen." David Kim felt tears welling up in his eyes as he listened to Andre speak. His father had been a construction worker who'd faced discrimination his entire career, never standing up for himself because he was afraid of losing his job. Watching Andre defend Maya reminded David of every time he'd wished his father had found the courage to fight back. But sometimes, Andre said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, real strength means standing up when walking away would let someone else get hurt. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. There was something about the way Andre spoke about strength, about fighting, that suggested experience far beyond what any janitor should possess. But his ego wouldn't let him process what his instincts were trying to tell him. "Enough philosophy," Marcus snapped, launching himself forward with a wild right hook. Andre moved like smoke. One moment he was directly in front of Marcus, the next he was 3 feet to the left, and Marcus's fist found nothing but air. The instructor spun around, confused and off balance, trying to locate his target. "Clean technique," Andre observed calmly, already repositioned and perfectly balanced. "Good power generation, but you telegraphed the punch with your shoulder. Against most opponents, that would work fine. Against someone who's been watching you fight for the last 10 minutes, not so much." Maya's eyes widened as she watched Andre move. She'd studied biomechanics as part of her sports psychology coursework, and what she'd just witnessed defied everything she thought she knew about human reaction time. Marcus threw a combination, this time jab cross hook, the sequence he'd used to intimidate countless students over the years. Again, Andre simply wasn't there. He flowed around the punches like water around stones, never seeming to hurry, never appearing threatened. "Better," Andre commented, still breathing easily. "The combination shows good training, but you're dropping your left hand after the cross. Leaves you open for a counter." The students watched in stunned silence as their instructor, A man they'd seen dominate sparring sessions for years couldn't land a single punch on a janitor who moved like he was dancing. Jennifer kept recording her hands shaking as she realized she was capturing something extraordinary. This wasn't just a sparring session gone wrong. This was a masterclass in movement and control delivered by someone who clearly understood fighting at a level that Marcus had never reached. "Stop playing around and fight!" Marcus shouted, desperation creeping into his voice as he launched an even more aggressive assault. Andre sidestepped the attack effortlessly, and for the first time he moved closer instead of maintaining distance. When Marcus recovered from his missed combination, Andre was standing arm's length away, close enough to touch. "Marcus," Andre said softly, his voice carrying the weight of years of hard-earned wisdom. "Do you want to know the difference between someone who learned to fight in a gym and someone who learned to fight for their life?" Before Marcus could answer, Andre placed his palm gently against Marcus's chest. There was no visible force, no sudden movement, no aggression, just a gentle touch that somehow sent Marcus flying backward 3 feet to land flat on his back. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus lay on the mat staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. There was no pain, just the undeniable reality that he'd been moved by a force he couldn't comprehend or resist. Maya pulled out her phone with trembling hands and quickly typed "Andre Williams Martial Arts" into her search engine. What she found made her blood run cold, and she understood that they'd all just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered, struggling to get back to his feet. Andre extended his hand to help Marcus up, his expression showing no triumph, no arrogance, just the quiet satisfaction of someone who had remembered after 25 years of trying to forget exactly who he used to be. "Actually," Andre said gently, "it's quite simple once you understand leverage, timing, and energy transfer, principles I spent 25 years perfecting in professional competition." Maya looked up from her phone, her face pale with recognition. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You guys don't understand who he is, do you?" Maya's fingers trembled as she stared at her phone screen, scrolling through article after article. Andre Williams, professional MMA fighter, 5-time world champion, undefeated record, retired 25 years ago after a training accident that killed his best friend. The man mopping floors at their gym wasn't just some random janitor. He was a living legend. Andre Williams, Maya read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. Also known as Ghost Williams for his ability to seemingly disappear and reappear during fights, considered by many experts to be the most technically perfect fighter in MMA history. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Every student felt the same sinking realization that they'd been watching their instructor challenge one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. Marcus felt his face drain of color as the magnitude of his ignorance became clear. "Ghost Williams," David Kim repeated, his voice filled with awe. "My dad used to watch your fights when I was a kid. He said you were untouchable in the ring." Andre stood quietly in the center of the mat, neither confirming nor denying what Maya had discovered. For 25 years, he'd worked construction jobs, warehouse shifts, and custodial work, always moving on when people started asking too many questions about his past. But tonight, that carefully constructed anonymity had just been shattered. Marcus struggled to his feet, his legs still shaky from the encounter. You're really him, the ghost." "I was," Andre replied simply. "Long time ago, different life." Jennifer Walsh stopped recording and looked around the room with the expression of someone who just realized they'd captured something historically significant. In her years as an emergency room nurse, she'd seen plenty of tough guys and wannabe fighters come through with injuries from bar fights and gym accidents. But she'd never been in the presence of someone who'd competed at the absolute pinnacle of combat sports. "Why didn't you say anything?" Marcus asked, his voice a mixture of embarrassment and genuine curiosity. Why didn't you just tell me who you were?" Andre's expression grew distant, and for a moment, he was back in that training facility in Las Vegas, watching paramedics work frantically over Tony Rodriguez's motionless body. The guilt that had driven him from the sport crashed over him like a wave, as fresh and painful as it had been 25 years ago. "Because the man I used to be made a mistake that cost my best friend his life," Andre said quietly, "and I swore I'd never let pride or anger drive my actions again." The room fell silent as the weight of Andre's words settled over everyone. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized the depth of sacrifice this man had made. He'd walked away from fame, fortune, and a legacy that most fighters could only dream of, all because he'd chosen responsibility over glory. But watching Marcus abuse his position tonight, Andre continued, his voice growing stronger. Watching him try to humiliate you just for standing up for what's right, I remembered that sometimes staying silent isn't noble. Sometimes it's just cowardice dressed up as wisdom. Marcus felt like he was seeing Andre for the first time. The quiet dignity he'd mistaken for subservience was actually the self-control of someone who knew exactly how dangerous he could be. The calm demeanor wasn't weakness. It was the confidence of a man who had nothing left to prove to anyone. "I've been an idiot," Marcus said, his voice thick with shame. "I've been a complete fool." "We all make mistakes," Andre replied. "The question is what we do after we recognize them." David Kim stepped forward, his usual shyness replaced by something approaching reverence. "Mr. Williams, I have to ask, that move you just did where you barely touched him and he flew backward, I've never seen anything like that." Andre smiled slightly, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him all evening. "It's called a phantom strike. Takes about 15 years of dedicated training to master the timing and energy transfer. Most people think it's some kind of magic trick, but it's really just physics applied with very precise technique." Jennifer found herself thinking about all the self-defense classes she'd attended over the years, all the instructors who'd promised to teach her how to protect herself against larger attackers. None of them had ever demonstrated anything close to what she'd just witnessed. This wasn't choreographed movie fighting or weekend seminar techniques. This was real mastery applied with surgical precision. Would you be willing to teach us?" Maya asked hesitantly. "I mean, not necessarily fighting techniques, but the philosophy behind it, the self-control, the way you handled this whole situation." Andre looked around the room at the 10 students who'd witnessed his revelation. He saw genuine respect in their eyes, not the fear-based deference that Marcus had demanded, but the kind of admiration that came from recognizing true character under pressure. "I don't know," Andre said honestly. "I've spent 25 years trying to stay away from all of this. Teaching fighting techniques to people means taking responsibility for how they use those skills." As Andre spoke about responsibility and the weight of teaching others how to fight, Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. The words hit him like physical blows, each one resonating with a frequency that made his hands shake. Teaching fighting techniques to people means taking responsibility for how they use those skills, Andre had said, and suddenly Marcus was 12 years old again, standing in his childhood bedroom in South Chicago, watching his older brother Kevin lace up boxing gloves. Kevin had been everything Marcus wanted to be. Strong, confident, feared by the neighborhood bullies who used to chase Marcus home from school. When Kevin started training at the local gym, Marcus begged to come along. Kevin had laughed and said Marcus was too small, too soft, but eventually he'd given in. "I'll teach you some moves," Kevin had promised. "But you gotta understand something, little brother. Fighting ain't a game. You learn this stuff you become responsible for every time you use it." Marcus had nodded eagerly, not really understanding what his brother meant. All he knew was that he was tired of being afraid, tired of running, tired of feeling powerless. Kevin taught him how to throw a proper punch, how to keep his guard up, how to move his feet. More importantly, Kevin taught him that fighting was supposed to be about protection, not domination. "You use these hands to hurt someone who don't deserve it," Kevin had said, tapping Marcus's knuckles with his own, "and you dishonor everything I taught you. You understand me." Marcus had understood, at least he thought he had. But 6 months later, Kevin was dead, shot in a drive-by that had nothing to do with fighting or martial arts or any of the noble concepts he'd tried to teach his little brother. Just a case of being in the wrong place when rival dealers decided to settle their differences with bullets instead of words. 15-year-old Marcus had stood at Kevin's funeral, listening to their mother sob, watching their father stare at the casket with empty eyes. And something inside him had hardened that day. Something had twisted Kevin's lessons about protection into something darker, something about power and control and making sure no one could ever hurt him the way losing Kevin had hurt. Over the years, as Marcus climbed through the ranks of various martial arts disciplines, he'd forgotten Kevin's voice. He'd replaced his brother's teachings about responsibility with his own philosophy about dominance. He'd started believing that strength was about making others feel weak, That respect came from fear. That teaching meant breaking students down before building them up. Now, standing in this gym with a mop bucket nearby and a legend in front of him, Marcus remembered Kevin's hands on his shoulders. He remembered the gentle way his brother had corrected his form, the patience in Kevin's voice when he explained why certain techniques were dangerous, the emphasis on protection over aggression. Marcus felt a stab of recognition as Andre spoke about responsibility. For years, he'd been teaching students techniques without ever considering what kind of people he was creating. He'd focused on physical dominance while completely ignoring the mental and emotional discipline that should come with martial arts training. What if it wasn't about fighting? Maya pressed. What if it was about the other stuff? The way you read body language, the way you stayed calm under pressure, the way you protected someone who was being threatened. Andre considered this for a moment. He thought about Tony Rodriguez, who'd always said that their fighting skills were gifts that came with obligations. Tony had believed that true martial artists were protectors first and competitors second. Maybe there was a way to honor his memory by teaching others about responsibility and restraint rather than aggression and dominance. Maybe, Andre said finally, but it would have to be different from what you're used to. It wouldn't be about learning how to hurt people. It would be about learning how to protect people, including protecting them from your own anger and pride. The students nodded eagerly, and even Marcus found himself drawn to the idea of learning from someone who clearly understood martial arts on a level he'd never reached. For the first time in his career, he felt like a white belt again, humble and eager to learn from a true master. But first, Andre said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "We need to address what happened here tonight. Marcus, what you did to me was wrong, but what you did to Maya was worse. She showed more courage in 5 minutes than most people show in a lifetime, and instead of recognizing that you tried to intimidate her into silence." Marcus nodded, his face burning with shame. "You're absolutely right. Maya, I owe you an apology that's bigger than anything I could put into words. What I did was inexcusable." Maya looked at Marcus for a long moment, seeing something in his expression that hadn't been there before. The arrogance was gone, replaced by what appeared to be genuine remorse and humility. "Apologies are a good start," she said finally. "But what really matters is whether you're willing to change how you treat people going forward." Andre watched the exchange with approval. This young woman had shown wisdom beyond her years, understanding that real forgiveness required real change, not just words of regret. "That's exactly right," Andre said, "and that's where the real training begins. Not in learning how to fight, but in learning how to be the kind of person who doesn't need to fight to feel important." As the revelation of Andre's identity settled over the room, everyone present realized they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. They'd seen a legend emerge from hiding, not for glory or recognition, but to protect someone who couldn't protect herself. And in doing so, they'd learned more about real strength in one evening than they had in years of traditional training. The ghost had returned not as a fighter, but as a teacher, and his first lesson was already changing lives. The revelation of Andre's identity had shifted the entire dynamic in the room, but Maya sensed that the real demonstration was just beginning. She pulled out her phone again, this time opening the camera app. Her academic instincts told her that what was about to happen needed to be documented, not just for her thesis, but for history. "Mr. Williams," Maya said, her voice respectful but curious, "that move you did earlier, the Phantom Strike, could you explain how it actually works? I mean, from a biomechanical perspective." Andre glanced around the room, noting that every student was hanging on his words. Even Marcus, despite his earlier humiliation, leaned forward with genuine interest. For 25 years, Andre had avoided talking about the technical aspects of his fighting, but something about this group, their respect, their eagerness to learn, made him want to share. "The Phantom Strike isn't really about force," Andre explained, moving to the center of the mat. "It's about understanding energy flow, leverage points, and timing. Most people think power comes from muscle, but real power comes from understanding physics." Jennifer Walsh found herself thinking about her medical training, about how the human body was essentially a complex machine of levers and fulcrums. She'd studied anatomy for years, but she'd never considered how that knowledge could be applied to martial arts at this level. "Could you show us again?" David Kim asked hesitantly. "I mean, if Marcus is willing." Marcus felt his stomach clench at the thought of being on the receiving end of Andre's technique again, but he also recognized this as an opportunity to begin making amends. If Andre was willing to teach, then Marcus was willing to learn, even if it meant enduring another demonstration of just how outclassed he really was. "I'm willing," Marcus said, though his voice betrayed his nervousness. Andre studied Marcus for a moment, seeing the genuine desire to understand mixed with very natural fear. "It won't hurt," Andre assured him. "The Phantom Strike is designed to displace, not damage. That's what made it so effective in competition. Opponents would be moved without being injured, which meant they'd be confused rather than angry." Marcus stepped forward, trying to steady his breathing. He'd been on the wrong end of plenty of techniques over the years, but never from someone of Andre's caliber. It was like being a high school basketball player who suddenly found himself facing LeBron James one-on-one. "The key," Andre said, positioning himself an arm's length from Marcus, "is reading your opponent's center of gravity and energy flow. Everyone has micro-movements that telegraph their balance points. Watch Marcus's right shoulder. See how it dips slightly when he shifts his weight to his left foot." The students gathered closer, studying Marcus like he was a living anatomy lesson. Maya recorded everything, realizing she was capturing techniques that most martial artists would pay thousands of dollars to learn. "Now," Andre continued, "most people think you need to generate force to move someone. But if you understand leverage and timing, you can redirect their own energy against them." He placed his palm lightly against Marcus's chest, just above the heart. "Marcus, I want you to push forward, like you're trying to walk through me." Marcus pressed forward, putting his full body weight behind the movement. For a split second, he felt like he was pushing against solid rock. Then, without any visible change in Andre's posture or expression, Marcus found himself flying backward through the air. The sensation was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. There was no impact, no sudden force, just the feeling of being picked up by an invisible wave and carried backward until he landed gently on the mat 3 feet away. He wasn't hurt, just profoundly confused about the laws of physics. "Holy shit," whispered Jake Morrison, a construction worker who'd been training for 4 years. "How is that even possible?" Andre smiled at the young man's reaction. "It's the same principle engineers use when they design earthquake-resistant buildings. Instead of fighting the force, you redirect it. Marcus's forward momentum provided all the energy. I just guided it in a different direction." Maya stopped recording and immediately began typing notes into her phone. What she'd just witnessed wasn't just martial arts technique. It was applied physics at the highest level, the kind of body mechanics that sports scientists spent careers trying to understand. "The Phantom Strike took me 15 years to perfect," Andre continued, helping Marcus to his feet. "It's not something you learn in a weekend seminar. It requires understanding your own body so completely that you can feel other people's energy patterns." Jennifer found herself thinking about the self-defense classes she'd taken after a particularly bad night in the ER when a patient's boyfriend had gotten aggressive with the nursing staff. The instructor had taught them to go for eyes and groins, to fight dirty and run fast. But what Andre was showing them was something entirely different: the ability to control a situation without causing harm. "This is what I don't understand," said Lisa Chen, Maya's training partner and a software engineer. "If you could do this 25 years ago, if you were undefeated, why did you walk away? Why give up something you were so good at?" Andre's expression grew distant, and everyone in the room could sense they were approaching painful territory. For a moment, he was back in that Las Vegas training facility watching paramedics work desperately over Tony Rodriguez's motionless form. "Because being good at something doesn't make it right," Andre said quietly. "Because having power means being responsible for how you use it. And because sometimes the cost of victory is higher than anyone should have to pay." The room fell silent as Andre's words sank in. Marcus felt a sharp recognition in his chest, remembering his brother Kevin's warnings about responsibility and the weight of strength. "My best friend and training partner Tony Rodriguez died during a sparring session." Andre continued, his voice carrying the weight of 25 years of guilt. "I lost control because of some racist comments from the crowd. I hit him harder than I should have. He fell wrong, and he never got back up." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized the depth of sacrifice this man had made. He'd walked away from everything, fame, fortune, legacy, because he'd chosen responsibility over glory. "The investigation ruled it an accident," Andre said, "but I knew the truth. I'd let anger override my judgment, and it cost my best friend his life. That night I swore I'd never let emotions drive my fighting again. I retired immediately and disappeared from the martial arts world completely. David Kim stepped forward to his usual shyness, replaced by empathy. But what happened tonight? You didn't lose control. You stayed completely calm even when Marcus was attacking you. 25 years of practice, Andre replied. 25 years of learning to channel anger into protection instead of destruction. Tonight, watching Marcus abuse his position, seeing him try to intimidate Maya, I remembered that sometimes staying quiet isn't wisdom. Sometimes it's just cowardice dressed up as nobility. Jake Morrison, who'd spent most of his adult life solving problems with his fists, found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about strength. So you're saying real power is knowing when not to use it? Real power, Andre said, is using your strength to protect people who can't protect themselves. Real power is lifting others up instead of tearing them down. And real power is having the discipline to walk away from a fight that doesn't need to happen. Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside his chest as Andre spoke. For 23 years, ever since Kevin's death, he'd believed that strength was about making others fear you, but listening to Andre, he realized he'd been carrying his grief all wrong. I've been doing everything backward, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. All these years, I thought I was honoring Kevin's memory by being strong. But what I was really doing was dishonoring everything he taught me about protection and responsibility. Andre looked at Marcus with understanding. Grief can do that to us. When we lose someone who represents our better angels, sometimes we become our worst demons just to survive the pain. The students watched this exchange with fascination, realizing they were witnessing something far more valuable than any fighting technique. They were seeing two men confront their past mistakes and choose to become better versions of themselves. The real question, Andre said, looking around the room at all 10 students, is what you do with this knowledge now. You've seen what real martial arts looks like, not the flashy stuff from movies, but the quiet discipline of someone who understands the weight of their abilities. Maya raised her hand tentatively. Would you consider teaching us not fighting techniques necessarily, but the philosophy, the self-control, the way you handled this whole situation? Andre considered the question for a long moment. He thought about Tony Rodriguez, who'd always believed that their skills came with obligations to help others. Maybe there was a way to honor his memory by teaching people about responsibility and restraint rather than aggression and dominance. Maybe, Andre said finally. But it would be different from what you're used to. It wouldn't be about learning how to hurt people. It would be about learning how to protect people, including protecting them from your own anger and pride. As the words left Andre's mouth, everyone in the room understood that they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. They'd seen a legend emerge from hiding not for glory or recognition, but to protect someone who couldn't protect herself. And in doing so, they'd learned more about real strength in one evening than they had in years of traditional training. The ghost had returned, and his first lesson was already changing lives. Jennifer Walsh couldn't sleep that night. As an emergency room nurse, she'd seen her share of dramatic moments, but nothing had prepared her for what she'd witnessed at the gym. By the time she got home to her apartment in Lincoln Park, she'd already watched the video she'd recorded 17 times. Each viewing revealed new details she'd missed in the moment. The subtle shift in Andre's posture, the way Marcus's confidence had crumbled the transformation from janitor to legend in real time. At 2 a.m, she made a decision that would change everything. She uploaded the video to her Instagram account with the caption, "Thought I was watching a sparring session. Turned out I was witnessing a masterclass in humility." This is Andre "Ghost" Williams, 5-time world MMA champion, teaching my arrogant instructor what real strength looks like. Jennifer had 3,000 followers, mostly other healthcare workers and fitness enthusiasts. She figured maybe a few dozen people would see it. Maybe her nurse friends would get a kick out of the karma aspect. She had no idea she was about to break the internet. By 6 a.m., the video had been shared 800 times. By noon, it was trending on TikTok with hashtags like Black Excellence Humility Check and Legend Revealed. By evening, it had been picked up by ESPN TMZ and every major sports blog on the planet. The headline that dominated social media feeds everywhere read, "Legendary fighter emerges from hiding to humble, arrogant instructor." Marcus woke up to 47 missed calls and hundreds of text messages. His phone had been buzzing non-stop since dawn, but he'd been ignoring it, still processing everything that had happened the night before. When he finally checked his notifications, his blood ran cold. The first message was from his landlord. Saw the video, Marcus. Not good for the gym's reputation. Need to talk ASAP. The second was from Tommy Chen, his most senior student and assistant instructor. Bro, you need to see what's happening online. It's bad. Marcus fumbled with his laptop, his hands shaking as he searched for his own name. What he found made him feel sick to his stomach. The video was everywhere, and the comments were brutal. People were calling him a racist, a bully, a fake martial artist. Someone had created a meme of his face with the caption, "When you challenge a legend without knowing it." Another showed him flying backward with the text, "Reality check in progress." Elite Combat Academy's phone hadn't stopped ringing since the gym opened at 6 a.m. Sarah Martinez, the front desk manager, had fielded over 200 calls from reporters, bloggers, and angry community members. By 10 a.m., she'd stopped answering altogether and just let the machine pick up. Elite Combat Academy, this is Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview Marcus Sullivan about last night's incident. Yeah, this is Marcus's mother. I just saw the video online. Is my son okay? What happened? This is the Chicago Sun-Times. We're running a story about workplace discrimination in martial arts. The gym's Google reviews, which had been mostly positive for years, were suddenly flooded with one-star ratings. People were posting screenshots from the video alongside comments like, "This place breeds bullies," and "Stay away unless you enjoy watching instructors humiliate employees." Maya arrived at the gym around 11 a.m. to find the parking lot surprisingly empty. Usually the Thursday morning classes would have the place packed, but today there were only 3 cars in the lot. She walked inside to find Sarah at the front desk, looking overwhelmed and exhausted. "Maya, thank God you're here," Sarah said, her voice strained. "It's been chaos all morning. The video is everywhere. The phone won't stop ringing. And Marcus," she gestured toward his office. "He's been in there for 2 hours just staring at his computer." Maya felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of her was satisfied that Marcus was finally facing consequences for his behavior, but another part felt genuinely sorry for how thoroughly his life was being dismantled. The internet had a way of turning justice into mob vengeance, and watching it happen in real time was unsettling. "Have you talked to Andre?" Maya asked. "He called about an hour ago," Sarah replied. "Said he never wanted this to happen, that he just wanted to teach Marcus a lesson, not destroy his life. He sounded really upset about how big this has gotten." David Kim arrived 30 minutes later, followed by Jake Morrison and Lisa Chen. Each of them had seen the video online and come to check on the gym. What they found was a business in freefall, with students canceling memberships and the media circus growing by the hour. "This is insane," Jake said, scrolling through his Twitter feed. "People are calling for boycotts, demanding the gym be shut down. Someone even started a petition to have Marcus banned from teaching martial arts anywhere in Chicago." Lisa, who worked in tech and understood viral content, shook her head grimly. "This is what happens when something hits the algorithm just right. The story has everything: racial tension, workplace drama, a legendary figure, instant karma. It's designed to go viral." By 2 p.m., Elite Combat Academy's membership had dropped by 60%. Students were calling to cancel their contracts, citing the hostile environment and negative publicity. 3 corporate sponsors had already pulled their support, and the landlord was threatening to terminate the lease due to the media attention. Marcus finally emerged from his office around 3 p.m. looking like he'd aged 10 years in a single day. His eyes were red from staring at screens, his shoulders slumped with the weight of watching his entire professional life crumble in real time. "I need to make this right," he said to the small group of remaining students. "I need to apologize, publicly explain what really happened, take responsibility for my actions." Maya looked at him with sympathy. "Marcus, I don't think you understand how the internet works. This isn't about facts or nuance or learning from mistakes. This is about entertainment. People don't want your apology, they want your destruction." She was right. Marcus's attempt at a public apology video posted that evening only made things worse. Comments poured in, calling him fake, manipulative, and insincere. People accused him of only apologizing because he got caught, not because he was genuinely sorry. The video received 40,000 dislikes within an hour of being posted. Local news stations picked up the story, framing it as a case study in workplace harassment and toxic masculinity in sports. The Chicago Tribune ran an op-ed titled "The Andre Williams Video and What It Says About Power Dynamics in Athletics." Academic blogs began analyzing the incident through the lens of racial discrimination and social media justice. Andre watched the media frenzy unfold from his small apartment on the South Side, feeling sick to his stomach. He dealt with plenty of media attention during his fighting career, but this felt different. This felt cruel and excessive, like watching someone be drawn and quartered in the digital town square. "I never wanted this to happen," he told Maya over the phone. "I just wanted him to understand that actions have consequences. I didn't want to destroy his life." Maya understood Andre's guilt, but she also recognized something that he couldn't see from his perspective. "Andre, I know this feels awful, but Marcus needed to face real consequences. He's been bullying students for years. What happened to you wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern of behavior that nobody ever challenged." 3 days after the video went viral, Elite Combat Academy closed its doors permanently. The landlord had terminated the lease, the remaining sponsors had fled, and the membership base had evaporated completely. Marcus found himself facing financial ruin. His reputation destroyed, his career in martial arts effectively over. But something unexpected was happening in the aftermath. Students from other gyms around Chicago were reaching out to Maya and the others, sharing their own stories of instructors who abused their authority. The video had sparked a wider conversation about power dynamics in martial arts, about the difference between discipline and humiliation, about the responsibility that came with teaching others to fight. Jennifer Walsh, whose decision to post the video had started everything, found herself at the center of a debate about social media justice and viral accountability. She received interview requests from major news outlets speaking opportunities at nursing conferences, and both praise and criticism for her role in Marcus's downfall. "I keep asking myself if I did the right thing," she told Maya during a coffee meeting near the hospital where she worked. "Part of me is glad that Andre got recognition for standing up to a bully, but part of me feels terrible about what happened to Marcus." Maya stirred her latte thoughtfully. "I think that's the point, though. Real justice is complicated. It's supposed to make us uncomfortable. If it felt completely good, that would probably mean we were just enjoying revenge." As the week progressed, Marcus hit rock bottom. His savings were depleted, his professional network had abandoned him, and his attempts to find work in martial arts were met with immediate rejection. The video followed him everywhere, a permanent digital scarlet letter that made rebuilding seem impossible. It was during this darkest moment that Marcus remembered something his brother Kevin had once told him. "The measure of a man isn't whether he falls down, little brother. It's whether he gets back up and chooses to become better than he was before." For the first time since the video went viral, Marcus began to think about redemption not as damage control but as genuine transformation. He realized that his old life was gone forever, and maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Maybe this complete destruction was exactly what he needed to rebuild himself from the ground up the way Kevin would have wanted him to. The question was whether Andre Williams, the man whose single touch had brought down his entire world, would be willing to help him learn how to stand back up again. 2 weeks after Elite Combat Academy closed its doors, Marcus found himself sitting in his car outside Andre's apartment building at 11 p.m., his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He'd been there for 3 hours, working up the courage to either go upstairs or drive home. The rage that had been building inside him since the video went viral felt like a living thing clawing at his chest, demanding satisfaction. The financial devastation was complete. His bank account was empty. His credit cards maxed out his car 3 payments behind. He'd applied for jobs at a dozen gyms across the city, only to be turned away the moment managers recognized his name. The video had made him unemployable in the only profession he'd ever known. But worse than the financial ruin was the humiliation. Every time he walked down the street, he wondered if people recognized him as that guy from the video. His mother had stopped taking his calls after her church friends started asking uncomfortable questions. His few remaining friends had distanced themselves, afraid that association with him would damage their own reputations. Tonight, something had snapped. Marcus had spent the evening drinking alone in his studio apartment, scrolling through social media comments that called him a racist, a bully, a pathetic excuse for a martial artist. The alcohol had amplified his anger until it became a white-hot fury focused entirely on Andre Williams. "This is all his fault," Marcus muttered to himself, staring up at the third-floor window where Andre's apartment light was still on. "He could have just told me who he was. He could have handled it quietly. But no, he had to humiliate me in front of everyone. Marcus had convinced himself that Andre had orchestrated the whole thing, that the humble janitor act was just set up for a public takedown. In his alcohol-fueled rage, he'd forgotten about his own behavior, his own choices, his own responsibility for what had happened. He got out of the car and walked toward the building entrance, his movements unsteady but determined. The security door was propped open with a brick. Typical for older Chicago buildings, where half the residents had friends who didn't want to buzz up. Marcus climbed the stairs slowly, his heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and whiskey. Andre was sitting at his kitchen table grading papers from the night classes he taught at Malcolm X Community College. Since Elite Combat Academy had closed, he'd picked up extra shifts teaching basic mathematics to adults working toward their GEDs. The pay was terrible, but the work felt meaningful in a way that custodial jobs never had. The knock on his door was aggressive, impatient. Andre glanced at the clock. 11:15 p.m. He wasn't expecting anyone, and his neighbors knew better than to disturb him this late. He approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. Marcus stood in the hallway, swaying slightly, his face flushed with alcohol and anger. Andre sighed deeply, recognizing the look of a man who'd come seeking violence as a solution to problems that violence had created in the first place. "Marcus," Andre said through the door, his voice calm but firm, "it's late. Whatever you're thinking about doing, this isn't the way. Open the door." Marcus slurred, pounding his fist against the wood. "We need to settle this man to man." Andre had dealt with angry drunks before, both during his fighting career and in the years since. He knew that engaging with someone in Marcus's state was like trying to reason with a wildfire, dangerous and ultimately pointless. But he also knew that Marcus wasn't going to leave without some kind of confrontation. "Marcus, I'm going to open this door," Andre said clearly, "but I want you to understand something first. You're drunk, you're angry, and you're looking for someone to blame for your problems. I'm not that person. Your problems started long before you met me." Andre opened the door slowly, keeping his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. Marcus stumbled forward slightly, his fists clenched, his eyes red with alcohol and rage. "You destroyed my life," Marcus said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Everything I worked for, everything I built, gone because of your little demonstration." Andre stepped aside, allowing Marcus into the apartment, but maintaining a safe distance. The living room was sparse but clean. A couch, a coffee table, a bookshelf filled with philosophy texts and biographies of civil rights leaders. On the wall hung a single-framed photograph of Andre and Tony Rodriguez after a championship fight, their arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning with the joy of shared victory. Marcus noticed the photo and felt his anger spike. Must be nice having all those memories of being somebody important, having people respect you, having a legacy. "You want to know about legacy?" Andre asked quietly, settling into his reading chair while keeping his eyes on Marcus. "Let me tell you about Tony Rodriguez." Marcus remained standing, his fists still clenched, but something in Andre's tone made him listen. Tony grew up in East LA, son of immigrants who worked 3 jobs each just to keep food on the table, Andre began. "When we started training together, he was nobody special, just another kid from the barrio who was tired of being pushed around. But Tony had something that most fighters never develop. He understood that real strength wasn't about proving you were better than other people. It was about becoming better than you used to be." Andre's voice carried the weight of 25 years of grief, but also something else. A deep love for his lost friend that had never diminished. Tony used to say that every person we met was fighting battles we couldn't see, carrying burdens we couldn't understand. He said that our job as fighters wasn't to add to their pain, but to show them that strength could be used for protection instead of destruction. Marcus felt his anger wavering as Andre spoke. There was something about the way Andre talked about his friend with such genuine love and respect. That reminded Marcus of how he used to think about his brother Kevin. "The night Tony died," Andre continued, "we were sparring after a particularly brutal press conference. The reporters had spent an hour asking racist questions, making comments about whether fighters from our backgrounds belonged in elite competition. I was furious, and I let that fury drive my punches. Tony tried to absorb one of my combinations, but I was hitting with emotion instead of technique. He fell wrong, hit his head, and never woke up." Andre stood up and walked to the photograph, touching the frame gently. I've carried the guilt of that moment every day for 25 years, not just because I threw the punches that killed him, but because I dishonored everything he'd taught me about using strength responsibly. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest as he listened. The rage that had brought him here was being replaced by a recognition that was both painful and profound. "Your friend, he sounds like my brother Kevin. Tell me about Kevin," Andre said, turning back to Marcus with genuine interest. Marcus sank onto the couch, his anger deflating like a punctured balloon. "Kevin taught me to fight when I was 12, but he always said that fighting was about protecting people, not hurting them. He said that if I ever used what he taught me to hurt someone who didn't deserve it, I'd be dishonoring his memory." What happened to Kevin? Gang violence. Wrong place, wrong time. He was 15. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "After he died, I guess I decided that the world was too dangerous to be gentle. I turned everything Kevin taught me upside down, used his lessons to build walls instead of bridges." Andre nodded slowly, understanding flooding his features. Grief can make us forget who we're supposed to be. When we lose someone who represents our better angels, sometimes we become our worst demons just to survive the pain. "But that's not an excuse," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "Kevin would be ashamed of what I became. He'd be ashamed of how I treated you, how I treated my students, how I used his memory to justify becoming a bully. The question isn't whether Kevin would be ashamed of who you were," Andre said gently. "The question is whether he'd be proud of who you choose to become now." Marcus looked around Andre's modest apartment, noting the philosophy books, the simple furniture, the absence of any trophies or awards from Andre's legendary career. "How do you do it? How do you live with the guilt?" "By trying to honor Tony's memory every day," Andre replied. "By using whatever strength I have left to protect people instead of hurting them. By teaching others that real power comes from lifting people up, not tearing them down." "But I destroyed everything," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "My gym, my reputation, my students, everything's gone. How do I come back from that?" Andre sat down across from Marcus, leaning forward with the intensity of someone who'd walked through the valley of despair and emerged on the other side. "You don't come back to who you were, Marcus. That person needed to die. You build something new, something worthy of Kevin's memory. How? By starting small, by helping one person at a time, by proving through your actions that you've learned what strength really means." Andre paused, studying Marcus's face. "By accepting that redemption isn't something you earn quickly or easily. It's something you work toward every day for the rest of your life." Marcus felt something shifting inside him, the anger and resentment that had driven him here giving way to something that felt almost like hope. Would you be willing to help me teach me how to be the kind of man Kevin wanted me to be?" Andre looked at this broken man sitting in his living room, remembering Tony's belief that everyone deserved a second chance if they were willing to do the work. "Yeah," Andre said quietly. "I think I can do that." For the first time since the video had gone viral, Marcus felt like he could breathe again. The road to redemption would be long and difficult, but for the first time in weeks, he believed it might actually be possible. Outside, Chicago slept on, unaware that in a modest apartment on the South Side, two men haunted by loss were beginning the slow work of healing. Not just their own wounds, but the wounds they'd inflicted on others through their grief and pain. It was the beginning of something new, something that would honor the memory of both Tony Rodriguez and Kevin Sullivan, two young men who'd understood that real strength was meant to protect, not destroy. 6 months after that late-night conversation in Andre's apartment, Maya Chen received a text message that made her nearly drop her morning coffee. It was from Andre, and it contained just an address and a time, 1247 West Madison Street, 7 p.m. tonight. "Bring David and the others if they're interested. Something I want to show you all." Maya had kept in touch with Andre sporadically since the Elite Combat Academy incident, mostly through brief phone calls where she updated him on her thesis progress. Her research on power dynamics in martial arts had evolved into a comprehensive study of how viral social media events could catalyze real change in athletic communities. The Andre Williams video had become her primary case study, cited in academic papers and presented at 3 different conferences. David Kim was the first to respond to Maya's group text about Andre's invitation. He'd struggled with finding a new gym after Elite closed, visiting 5 different schools, only to discover instructors who either reminded him too much of Marcus at his worst or were so focused on competition that they'd forgotten why he'd started training in the first place. Andre's brief lessons about protection over domination had changed how David viewed martial arts entirely. Jennifer Walsh arrived at the address first, her nursing shift having ended early due to a surprisingly quiet evening in the ER. The building was a converted warehouse in a part of the city that had seen better days, but was slowly gentrifying. Large windows faced the street, and through them, she could see people moving around inside, setting up equipment and arranging mats. Jake Morrison pulled up in his work truck just as Maya and David arrived together. The construction worker had spent months thinking about Andre's philosophy of using strength to protect rather than intimidate. It had changed how he interacted with his crew, how he handled confrontations at job sites, even how he talked to his teenage daughter about standing up to bullies at school. Phoenix Martial Arts Academy. Lisa Chen read from the small sign beside the entrance. Interesting name choice. The interior of the building took Maya's breath away. The space was large and open, with high ceilings and exposed brick walls that gave it an industrial but welcoming feel. Traditional martial arts equipment was arranged alongside modern training tools, heavy bags next to meditation cushions, weights next to a small library of philosophy books. But what caught everyone's attention was the man leading a class of about 15 students in the center of the room. Andre Williams moved through a series of flowing movements, his students following with varying degrees of skill but uniform concentration. His voice carried clearly across the space as he guided them through what looked like a combination of martial arts forms and mindfulness exercises. Remember, the goal isn't to perfect the technique, Andre was saying. The goal is to understand your own body, your own reactions, your own capacity for both strength and restraint. Maya noticed that the students were incredibly diverse, teenagers and seniors, different ethnicities and economic backgrounds, some wearing traditional GI and others in simple workout clothes. What united them was an atmosphere of mutual respect that felt completely different from the competitive tension she remembered from Elite Combat Academy. As the class concluded, Andre spotted Maya and the others near the entrance. His face broke into a genuine smile as he walked over to greet them. "Welcome to Phoenix," Andre said, gesturing around the space. "Rising from the ashes of our old mistakes." "Andre, this is incredible," Maya said, looking around with amazement. "How did you manage all this?" "I had help," Andre replied, and Maya noticed his eyes shift toward a figure emerging from what looked like an office area in the back of the building. Marcus Sullivan looked completely different from the man Maya remembered. Gone was the arrogant posture, the expensive workout gear, the general air of superiority that had defined him at Elite Combat Academy. This Marcus moved with quiet confidence rather than aggressive bravado, wearing simple clothes and carrying himself with the humility of someone who'd been broken down and rebuilt from the foundation up. David Kim felt his jaw drop. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Marcus approached the group slowly, clearly nervous about their reaction to seeing him. "Andre asked me to help him get this place started," he said, his voice carrying none of the commanding tone they remembered. "I know that probably sounds crazy given everything that happened." Jennifer Walsh studied Marcus with the clinical eye of someone who'd seen people at their worst and their best. What she saw wasn't the broken, angry man from 6 months ago or the arrogant instructor from before that. This was someone who'd clearly done serious work on himself, who carried his past mistakes like scars rather than wounds. "How" was all Jake Morrison could manage to say. Andre gestured for everyone to sit on the meditation cushions arranged in a circle near the center of the room. "Marcus came to me 6 months ago looking for a fight," he said. What he found instead was someone who understood what it felt like to carry guilt that was eating you alive. Marcus nodded, his hands clasped in his lap. "Andre didn't just teach me new techniques. He taught me how to examine everything I thought I knew about strength, about teaching, about what it means to be a martial artist." "The first 3 months were just talking," Andre continued. "Marcus volunteering here, cleaning equipment, helping with basic tasks, while we worked through 23 years of misdirected grief and anger." Maya looked between the two men, trying to process the transformation she was witnessing. "And you trust him after everything that happened?" "Trust is earned through actions, not words," Andre replied. For the past 3 months, Marcus has been working with our youth program teaching kids who've been kicked out of other schools for behavioral problems. David Kim leaned forward, intrigued. Kids with behavioral problems, Marcus spoke up, his voice gaining strength. Turns out the kids who get labeled as difficult are often just kids who've never been taught that their anger doesn't have to control them. Kids who've never had someone show them that strength can be used to protect instead of hurt. Jennifer thought about the teenagers she'd seen in the ER, victims of violence or perpetrators headed for worse outcomes. That's actually brilliant, using martial arts as therapy rather than just physical training. It's what Kevin would have wanted, Marcus said quietly. My brother always believed that fighting skills came with the responsibility to help people not hurt them. It just took me 23 years and a complete breakdown to remember that. Lisa Chen, with her background in technology and systems thinking, was fascinated by the model. So this isn't just a traditional martial arts school. It's more like a community center with martial arts as one component. Andre nodded. We offer basic literacy classes, job training workshops, conflict resolution seminars. The martial arts training is just one tool in a larger toolkit for helping people build better lives. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes as she understood the scope of what Andre and Marcus had built together. This is what restorative justice actually looks like, isn't it? Not just punishment, but transformation. Marcus didn't just apologize for what he did, Andre explained. He committed to spending the rest of his career proving that he'd learned from his mistakes. That's the only kind of redemption that matters, the kind that creates value for other people. Jake Morrison looked around the space with new appreciation. So when you said Marcus was helping you get this place started, Marcus provided the initial funding, Andre said. He sold everything he had left, liquidated his retirement accounts, took out loans against his future to help make this happen. Marcus shifted uncomfortably at being the center of attention. It wasn't charity, it was restitution. I spent years using martial arts to make people feel small. This is my chance to use those same skills to help people feel strong. David Kim stood up and walked over to one of the walls where photos showed students of all ages engaged in various activities. These kids, they look happy, confident. That's Jamal, Marcus said, pointing to a photo of a skinny 13-year-old boy demonstrating a technique to a younger student. Came to us after getting suspended from 3 different schools for fighting. Turns out he was just trying to protect his little sister from bullies. Now he's one of our peer mentors. Jennifer studied another photo showing Marcus working with a group of teenage girls. You're really doing this. You're actually teaching again. I'm learning to teach, Marcus corrected. Andre's been showing me the difference between instructing and educating, between demanding respect and earning it. Maya pulled out her phone and began taking notes, her academic mind already spinning with the implications of what she was seeing. This could be a model for martial arts education everywhere, trauma-informed training community integration, restorative justice principles. That's the goal, Andre said. We're not trying to create champions or trophies. We're trying to create better people. As the evening progressed, Andre gave them a full tour of the facility. The back office contained files on every student tracking not just their martial arts progress, but their academic achievement, family stability, and personal goals. The storage room held donated clothes and school supplies for families in need. The small kitchen was set up to provide meals for students who came straight from school or work. This is what Tony would have wanted, Andre said as they concluded the tour, using our skills to build community instead of just building ourselves. Marcus looked at the group of people who'd witnessed his lowest moment and said, I know I can't undo the damage I caused. I can't give you back the safe training environment I destroyed at Elite, but I can promise you that every day for the rest of my life, I'm going to work to prove that people can change if they're willing to do the work. Maya felt a complex mix of emotions as she processed everything she'd seen. The academic in her was fascinated by the social innovation. The martial artist in her was inspired by the philosophy. And the human being in her was moved by the genuine transformation she'd witnessed. I want to help, she said suddenly. My thesis defense is next month, and after that, I'll have time. This is the kind of research that could change how martial arts schools operate everywhere. David Kim nodded enthusiastically. Count me in. I've been looking for a place to train that actually meant something. One by one, the others voiced their support. Jennifer offered to provide basic first aid training and connect them with healthcare resources. Jake volunteered his construction skills for facility improvements. Lisa promised to help with technology infrastructure and social media outreach. As they prepared to leave that evening, Andre gathered them in a final circle. 6 months ago, we were all scattered by an incident that could have destroyed everything. Tonight, we're coming together to build something better than what we lost. Marcus looked around the circle at faces that had once watched him at his worst. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove that redemption is possible. Thank you for helping me become the kind of teacher Kevin always wanted me to be. Outside, Chicago bustled with its usual evening energy, unaware that in a converted warehouse on West Madison Street, something extraordinary was taking root. Phoenix Martial Arts Academy wasn't just rising from the ashes of Elite Combat Academy. It was rising from the ashes of broken lives, failed philosophies, and misguided strength. It was proof that sometimes the most profound victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from transforming them into allies in the fight for something better. 1 year later, Maya Chen stood at the podium of the International Conference on Martial Arts Education, looking out at an audience of instructors, researchers, and policymakers from around the world. Her presentation titled, "From Viral Shame to Community Transformation, the Phoenix Academy Model," had drawn standing room only attendance. A year and a half ago, Maya began, I witnessed what I thought was a simple case of workplace harassment escalating into a physical confrontation. What I didn't realize was that I was actually watching the first scene of a story about redemption, community healing, and the true meaning of martial arts. In the audience, Jennifer Walsh took notes for the article she was writing for the American Journal of Emergency Medicine about violence prevention programs. Her research had shown that communities with trauma-informed martial arts programs saw a 37% reduction in youth violence incidents. Phoenix Academy had become a model that hospitals and community centers across the country were studying and replicating. The traditional model of martial arts education, Maya continued, focuses on individual achievement competition and hierarchy. Students advance through belt rankings, compete in tournaments, and measure success by their ability to defeat others. But what if we're thinking about this completely backward? David Kim watched the live stream from Phoenix Academy's newly expanded facility, where he now served as head of the adult education program. Around him, evening classes were in session, literacy tutorials in one corner, job interview preparation in another, and Marcus leading a group of formerly incarcerated individuals through conflict resolution exercises. The Phoenix model suggests that true martial arts mastery isn't about perfecting techniques to dominate opponents, Maya explained to her academic audience. It's about developing the emotional intelligence and community responsibility that ensures you never need to use those techniques destructively. The camera panned across Phoenix Academy's main training floor, where Andre worked with a group of 8-year-olds who'd been referred by the school district for behavioral issues. What struck viewers wasn't the martial arts techniques being practiced, but the atmosphere of mutual respect and emotional safety that permeated every interaction. Mr. Andre asked Sofia Martinez, a 7-year-old whose father was serving overseas, "Why do we always have to bow before we practice?" Andre knelt down to Sofia's eye level, a gesture that had become second nature after months of working with children who'd learned to associate adult authority with unpredictability and harm. "What do you think bowing means, Sofia?" "It means we respect each other," she guessed, looking around at her classmates for confirmation. "That's exactly right," Andre said. "And why is that important before we learn fighting techniques?" A 9-year-old named Marcus Jr., named after his mentor, Marcus Sullivan, raised his hand eagerly. "Because if we don't respect people, then fighting becomes about hurting instead of protecting." Andre smiled, remembering how this same child had arrived 6 months earlier, angry and defensive, after being expelled from 2 previous programs for aggressive behavior. Now, Marcus Jr. was one of their peer mediators, helping newer students understand the emotional foundations that made physical training safe and meaningful. The most revolutionary aspect of the Phoenix model, Maya told her conference audience, is that it treats martial arts training as a form of community therapy. Students don't just learn how to fight. They learn how to process trauma, manage anger, build healthy relationships, and contribute to collective well-being. Jake Morrison, now serving on Phoenix Academy's board of directors, had seen this transformation firsthand in his own family. His daughter Emily, once shy and afraid of confrontation, had blossomed into a confident young woman who used the emotional skills she'd learned at Phoenix to mediate disputes between her classmates at school. "Dad," Emily had told him just the previous week, "I finally understand what Mr. Andre means about strength. It's not about being able to beat people up. It's about being able to help people feel safe." Lisa Chen had been documenting this community impact through a comprehensive data analysis project that tracked not just individual student outcomes, but broader neighborhood trends. Crime rates in the 6-block radius around Phoenix Academy had dropped by 22% in the past year. High school graduation rates were up. Emergency room visits for violence-related injuries were down. The data suggests, Maya explained to her audience, that when you teach people to use physical strength responsibly, you're actually teaching them to use all forms of power responsibly. Students who learn emotional regulation through martial arts training apply those same skills to parenting, workplace conflicts, and community leadership. Back at Phoenix Academy, Marcus was concluding his evening class with the ritual that had become central to their program. Instead of ending with competitive sparring or technique drills, each session concluded with a circle where students shared one way they'd used their training to help someone else during the week. "I helped my little brother with his homework instead of getting mad when he didn't understand," shared Destiny Williams, a 14-year-old whose mother worked double shifts to support their family. "I talked to my coworker about her problems instead of just avoiding her when she was stressed," added Robert Kim David's father, who joined the program after watching his son's transformation. "I apologized to my daughter for losing my temper last week and asked her to help me practice patience," contributed Maria Santos, a single mother studying for her nursing degree. Marcus listened to each story with the attention of someone who understood that these small moments of applied wisdom were worth more than any tournament victory or belt promotion. This was what Kevin had tried to teach him 30 years ago, that real martial arts wasn't about defeating enemies, but about becoming the kind of person who created fewer enemies in the world. "Mr. Marcus asked Jamal Thompson, the former troublemaker who was now applying to college with Phoenix Academy's support, "Do you ever miss the old days when you had your own gym and everyone was afraid of you?" Marcus considered the question seriously. A year ago, he might have felt defensive about his past. Now he saw it as an opportunity to model the kind of honest self-reflection that Phoenix Academy tried to cultivate in all its students. "Jamal, I thought being feared made me strong," Marcus replied, "but I was actually weak because I needed other people to be afraid in order to feel important. Real strength is what you see here. People supporting each other, learning together, becoming better versions of themselves." The Phoenix model challenges one of the fundamental assumptions of competitive culture, Maya told her conference audience, the assumption that someone else has to lose in order for you to win. Instead, it suggests that the highest form of victory is when your success lifts up everyone around you. Andre concluded his evening classes and walked through the academy, checking on the various programs still in session. In the community room, Jennifer was leading a CPR certification class for parents. In the computer lab, Lisa was teaching basic coding skills to teenagers interested in technology careers. In the quiet corner, several students worked on homework with volunteer tutors from local universities. This was what Tony Rodriguez had envisioned when he'd talked about martial arts as a tool for community building. This was what Kevin Sullivan had meant when he'd told his little brother that fighting was about protection, not domination. Phoenix Academy had become living proof that individual transformation could catalyze collective healing. As we conclude, Maya said to her international audience, "I want to leave you with the words that Andre Williams shares with every new student at Phoenix Academy. These words have become not just a philosophy for martial arts training, but a framework for how we approach conflict, competition, and community in all aspects of life." The conference hall fell silent as Maya prepared to share the wisdom that had emerged from one of the most viewed viral videos in social media history. "Never underestimate anyone based on their appearance, their job, or their circumstances," Maya recited. "Everyone carries stories that can surprise you, skills that can humble you, and wisdom that can change you. True strength isn't about proving you're better than others. It's about helping others become better than they thought they could be." She paused, looking out at the audience of educators and practitioners who had the power to transform martial arts communities around the world. And sometimes, Maya concluded, the greatest victories are won not by destroying your opponents, but by showing them a path to become allies in the fight for something better than either of you could achieve alone. The sustained applause that followed wasn't just appreciation for an academic presentation. It was recognition of a truth that resonated across cultures and contexts, that real transformation happened when people chose healing over harm, community over competition, and growth over revenge. In Chicago, Andre Williams and Marcus Sullivan continued their quiet work of proving that redemption was possible, that enemies could become friends, and that the most powerful martial art of all was the ability to transform conflict into collaboration. The Ghost had returned not as a fighter, but as a healer, and his final lesson was still being written in the lives of everyone he touched. If this story of transformation and second chances moved, you remember that real change happens when we choose to see the potential for growth in ourselves and others. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not with fists, but with patience, understanding, and the courage to become better than we used to be.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.